Looking over the financials. Alan?
Jerry? Look in your, more farther back in your book, you see a yellow sticky notepad. You start right there.
The way y'all get about it, you want me to get up there to that podium?
No, you can just, wherever you're more comfortable.
I like grabbing a chair right here. Just talk about that.
Pass that down. There's you for it. Jim,
I got a few more too, Mark. I need a few more.
I think we're okay. You just take me one right there.
All right.
But you should have go to your financials where the yellow tab is right there.
All right, so everybody's got the financials in front of them. What we're gonna do real quick is we're gonna talk about kind of where we're at for the last 7 months through the end of July. First, we're gonna do a 6-month review, but I asked Mark, I said, look, since we got the 7 months done, let's go ahead and just do a 7-month review because that gets us closer to where you're really at now, you know. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about those 7 months. So y'all got the report right there. We'll start with the first page, and then I'm gonna go over the actual in detail, a little more detail, the budget items on at the account level. But on page 1, you'll have this. It's got reconciled cash balances. Y'all see that on the left? That's the cash balances of July 31st, and you'll see total general fund. That's all the accounts put together. You had about 281,000 with all the general fund accounts. That's general operating reserves, cemetery fund, and such. And then you'll see the downtown development account has 137,014, and then you've got a Reagan County bank account there for a total of 166,956. SPLOS has 339,163 in it right now. Or as the end of July, and then your water operating account only had 29,000 in it at the end of July. It's a little tighter than it's been in the past, you know, some. And then you've got a water sewer reserve of $1,000,005, Pinnacle CD reserves of $411. And then if you come down to the bottom section, it says water and sewer reserve bank balances. That $1,506 and that $411, those are balances that y'all have reserved, and only 200,000 of that has to be reserved for bonds. So if, let's just say, I don't know, you stop selling water and, you know, things got really tight. You really got $1,000,007 available in reserves, which should carry you for about 2 months. The thing that you got to watch, though, if y'all see those down at the very bottom, those monthly months of liquidity, you'll see we used to have 2.5 months of reserves, and now we're down to 2 months reserves. So what that means is we're spending a little bit more than we're bringing in, and so we just kind of got to watch it. And I'm going to point a few things out I want you to look at where I can see that we're spending a little more than we originally budgeted. As y'all know too, when we do the audit, we'll come in and we'll amend the budget at the end. So we'll make all the adjustments. Auditor will come in and do their thing. They'll have a few adjustments. Then we'll amend the whole budget. And there's some things on here now that I think really need to be amended, but it's kind of like, do you amend it now when you know you're going to amend it again later, or do we just wait to the end and amend the whole thing? If we didn't amend the budget, they'd have a finding every time, because if you spend more than you actually had in the budget, typically the auditor would show a finding. But most auditors always allow, after they make their entries, to do the amendment later. So it's just kind of understood that all cities do the same thing that we've been doing with you guys, and that's amend the budget later. So if you flip to page 2, this is just a sheet that we obviously give you guys each month on the notes and the bond payable balances. It shows you how much, as of the end of July, was owed from the GFA loans as well as the bonds. Y'all have had these in place for quite some time. It also shows you the remaining payments that's required for 24 for the next 5 months, and how much the monthly payments are to the right. Not a lot to discuss there. I mean, that just changes month to month, goes down on what's required because there's less months to pay, and then out to the right is how much you pay each month. There is one thing, the E1 pumper paid annually. You'll see that down there. That's the fire truck, and the annual payment's about $94,000. That was not, it's paid out of SPLOS, or it has been in the past. I don't think when y'all budgeted, I don't see where that was ever put on there as a budgeted item. It's not a big deal. I mean, like I said, we can amend it in the end, but when I show you the detail in a minute, you'll see where that 94, there's zero budgeted for that. But certainly, I would budget that out of SPOS every year.
And the 46,000 that's showing in there, that payment came out, that was the annual payment that was paid in August for Casey's police cars.
Yep. So you'll see that.
This is just July numbers.
That's right. So in August, you'll see no payments required there, that's left, because it'll be already done.
So you got 2 years remaining on these payments, once we make that third payment for the USDA.
Correct. That's correct. All right, if you flip over to the next page, this is a statement of revenue and expenditures, basically an income statement for the year dealing with the governmental funds. So that means this has nothing to do with water, has nothing to do with sewer. This is everything else related to property taxes, probation services, insurance premiums, all that kind of stuff, franchise taxes. If you go through there, I'd like to, if I could, so the other sheet that we gave you guys, this right here, had some little scribble written on it. Y'all got that? Pull that up real quick. And what that is over there is the detail of what you see on the page 3 of the report that you guys get. So for instance, like property taxes, you'll see up there 249. Well, that's made up on the sheet where we've got some scribble on there. You see that 246 in the year-to-date activity column up there in current property taxes. Y'all see that 246? Well, there's also down below, in about midway in that top section, you'll see property tax, interest, and penalties, 3,259. Those two together make up that 249 that you see on the other report. The sheet that's got some scribble on it is really where I want you to spend your time, because that's where you can actually see at the detail level what's being spent, at the account level. And so, for instance, property taxes, y'all collected $246,000 right now, but there'll be more later coming in the year. You'll have people pay in November, you'll have people pay in December. So that's where the hope is. You budgeted $344,000, so you would hope that some more taxes will come in before the end of the year that'll get you closer to that $344,000. So there's a lot of this is going to be a timing thing. If you look, for instance, the insurance premium tax, you'll see $156,000 budgeted. Year to date, nothing's been collected. Well, obviously that gets collected later in the year. So a lot of these things are fluid. I mean, some things don't even hit your budget till the very end of the year. Some things hit it early in the year. But I wanted you to look at this because you can see some of the things that's going to come in that's just because of timing it hadn't came in yet. One thing I wanted to point out, you'll see a miscellaneous revenue down there. Y'all see that? It's got $69,000 year to date. Now we only budgeted $25,000. Well, obviously miscellaneous revenue is what it is. It's miscellaneous. You don't always plan for it. But what's in there right now is y'all had gotten an insurance reimbursement of about $42,000, and right now that's where that's at. So that's something, Mark. If we decide we need to move to another account that better fits, we can, but right now that's stuck in miscellaneous revenue. A couple things I wanted to point out that are a little behind budget. If you look at the public safety section there, fines and forfeitures, you'll see that year to date you brought in $42,000, but if you were to extrapolate that out off a 12-month period, you should have brought in right at $58,000, and you brought in 42. So that means one of two things. Either we're not collecting the fines and forfeitures that we thought we were, or we over budgeted. It's possible that, and that obviously could be an item that we'll amend at the end of the year, but.
And we can just blame Robin on that because that's what would have been his budget.
But keep that in mind, because when you do a budget, it's nothing but a planning tool. But don't be overzealous and try to put some fairy tale number out there that you think you're going to collect when everything's got to work just perfect to collect that. So keep that in mind when you're budgeting, because sometimes the year to date may actually be more accurate than the budget's just a guess, really. So if you see, like when y'all go to budget this year, we didn't look at the budget a lot, Mark, this year. You kind of took charge of that, which I'm fine with. If there's questions when y'all doing the budget this year.
And we're already underway.
Good. Ask us. I'll be glad to kind of look and compare to what we've seen the last 2 or 3 years, because trends are real. If you see that each year you're spending a little more, okay, ask yourself first, why is that? I mean, obviously inflation, everything's more now, right? But if you need to increase that budget because you know it's just gonna cost more because things cost more than they did 2 years ago, then we gotta increase it. At the same time, we gotta make sure our revenues cover those expenditures. And that's the difficult thing for y'all, because nobody wants to see you go up. Obviously, I know you went up some on water this year, right? Nobody wants you to go up. Nobody wants to go up on property taxes, those kind of things. But the facts are, just like all of us at our homes, you know, cost us a lot more to go to the grocery store nowadays. Well, it costs a lot more to provide water. As y'all see, your water's a lot more expensive than it was. So what's that mean? Well, that means, obviously, you gotta go up to cover that. Now y'all did go up, but don't ever do business to lose money, if you can help it. Because you won't stay in business long. Obviously, the city's gonna be around, but I mean, if your water's going up 50% what it was 2 years ago, but you only increase your bills 15%, you're not gonna survive doing that. So, the citizens don't like it when you go up, but they live in the same world you do, and they just know that everything's up. So, I mean, make sure, even though it's tough decisions, that you know, you cover yourself. You don't want to, and we'll talk about it a little bit in a minute. Y'all always been unique in that your water always does pretty good, and so your water covers your general fund. Your general, being a small town, your generals always operate as a deficit until the transfers come in from the water. It would be nice if the water could keep more of that extra reserves, and then you see that 2-month reserve we got go to 3 or 4 months, or you might could use it for other projects. You got all these projects you got to do where you got to start working on some of your infrastructure. Well, obviously, the more you can keep in reserves, the more you could spend on infrastructure and not general operate. You know, so keep that in mind. But going through here, if you go down Public Works, you'll see there where it says year to date $84,079. Y'all with me on that still? All right. There, what we got there is you got 2 LMIGs in there, and you only budgeted 37. So right now, that one's, you know, you brought in 46,000.
Yeah, they gave us an additional one through the governor's office, and so that should be taken care of next week.
Yeah, good. Then if you come down to the bottom, and this may be a conference or something y'all went to, the very bottom down there though, do you see where it says conferences? So only 2,000 was budgeted, and 5,800's already been, or 8,200's already been spent there. 58 just this past month. But I'm assuming that's something y'all didn't do in the past that maybe you did this year. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's what that is. The biggest thing where I see you're over budget is on the salaries. Now that could be a couple of reasons for that. If you look in public safety, you'll see that 420 is budgeted for the year. Now, if I extrapolate that out 7 months, that means 245 would be where you're at right now. Right now, where you're at is 326. So I ask the question, is there just more employees, or is there just a lot of raises there? You know, but obviously you're spending quite a bit more than we budgeted. So my advice there would be, when you do the budget this year, look at those numbers pretty close, and, you know, just decide, hey, this is truly what it costs to operate, and so we need to bump that budget item. Because right now, it looks to me like that was an under-budgeted item, the salary. And you're going to see that trend on most all the salary lines, whatever, no matter what department it's in. If you come down on computer and software, where there's some scribble there were some laptops and computers that were bought this year. The reason that's in computer and software, not capital outlays, because individually, they're under $5,000, and the auditor, you know, if you look at their report, they say that they don't capitalize anything for less than, I think 5,000 was the threshold that they're using. So since those items individually are less than that, it's in that account called computer and software. Well, you didn't budget for that at the beginning of the year, but obviously that's an item that we'll amend. We just won't amend until later in the year. Come on down to salaries again. You'll see down there where it says plus 9,000. So on that one, you've spent year to date 58. I'm gonna find this other sheet I got here. Let's see. The 7-month annualized would be 49, so it's a little over 2. So I think that's the trend you're gonna see more than anything, is the salaries is the biggest item that's.
And obviously that's coming, that one is our fire. Correct. The 58,000 under the public safety down there.
30,
So that
the code is 3220, 32, 3230.
okay.
Yep. The 3220, Megan, is, which one is that? 3220. That's at the top, the one we talked about to start with.
Please.
Okay.
And so GCIC fall with its own separate placement that too, so technically.
Now the 3510, that's the fire, right?
Correct.
Yep. So if you look at 3510, go ahead and look at that one. Flip to page 3 of that report. You'll see we're 24,000, almost 25,000 over there than what we budgeted. So, salaries are the biggest thing, where we're a little high. Down below there, you'll see health insurance under public works. Now we're in the 4220s. You see public works down there. Health insurance, now, y'all might enlighten me a little bit there what happened, but we've spent year-to-date 19,886. We budgeted 11,200. So did we just miss that, or did something change drastically on the health insurance? What happened there?
So we did change on some insurance, but streets, their employees, some of their employees were being paid out of water, I think, in the previous year.
Okay.
And they're now being paid from streets because they're doing street work.
Gotcha.
So I think probably there it was allocated.
To that account.
And then in the streets.
Okay.
So I think.
We just want to make sure in the future, whoever gets that health insurance account, that they're also hitting that salary account right above it. We want to be sure if they're on streets and salary, then they're on streets and health insurance.
Yeah, we'll double check that.
And the other thing I would suggest is, as much as you can put to water and feel good about it, obviously we want to put that under water, because water's where your money's being made. I mean, that's the unique thing about City of Demorest. You got a healthy water. But the more expenses we can move to water, the less we got to transfer from water to general to cover those expenses, if that makes sense. Flip to the next page, 4 and 9. I just want to point this out. I don't know this is that big of a deal, but when we had originally in the downtown development, you'll see that section in the middle of downtown development. When we had originally budgeted those items, we said, okay, we're going to let the general cover 60% of this building, or the cost over here, and the water's going to cover 40. Well, that whole payment obviously is coming out of the water right now. So right now the water's making, if you look down at the debt service, the principal and interest, the water's paying all of that right now. So I just want to point that out. Now we could reallocate it, but then that would just make the transfer from water to general go up. So, I mean, I don't know that you have to do that, but the plan was to let general cover their fair share.
So I have a question on that. That is auto drafted, so we have to provide one account.
Okay.
What's your recommendation?
Then what we need to do is I need to talk to Scott when I get back to the office, and I need to ask him if he can't just make a journal entry, a monthly journal entry to reallocate. But like I said, to do that, what's going to happen is that transfer from water to general is going to go up.
Right.
And right now you're just a tad behind, which is positive. But now when I look at this, I mean, the reason you're behind is because that payment on the Downtown Development Authority is not being allocated to the general. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we can make a journal entry for that. If the bank requires you just to use one account, then I do that. If you go to the next one, down there in the SPLOST section, it says annual e-pumper payment. That was the one I was telling you about where the year-to-date activity is 94. You've already made that payment. But if you look to the left, you'll see those zeros there. That never got budgeted. We need to budget for that. Obviously, you're going to have that payment one more time next year. I do think, though, I mean, the SPLOST is the right place to pay it out of. I would pay it out of the SPLOST.
Right.
So I think it's in the right account. I just never got budgeted there.
So, in the past, this came from the general account, and I think there's been a general budget done to show it, or they've done something, this time.
Show it coming
Show
out of
it
this loss.
coming out of SPLOST.
Yeah, because you had money available in the SPLOST, and what was happening was SPLOST money was coming in, but it wasn't getting spent. And so we said, look, we need to spend this out of SPLOST now. So even though you didn't budget it, and y'all might have just budgeted like you had in the past in the general, it needs to come out of SPOS because that's where the money was. Because if it comes out of general, who's gonna pay for it? The water. So if you've got SPOS funds available that qualify, that's where we want to spend it.
So I think that's the confusion on that.
Right.
So I guess my question there would be, so are you saying there's a general fund account that has that 94 budgeted in it?
I don't know, I just recently, before the payment came out, I had to update, the banking account. And it previously had it in the general SPOS.
That was on the, and that's the same thing with 46,000.
Do me a favor, if you don't mind, tomorrow. Check and see if you can find if that 94 was budgeted in some general fund account. I didn't see it when I originally looked at this, but if it is, let me know, because I'd like to know.
In my mind, I knew it was coming out of SPOS when we did the budget last year. So, yeah, we can double check that.
Yeah, double check it. So next section is 505, the water stuff. You'll see water sales. That's a good example. 5.182's budgeted. Year to date is 2.8. I've got over here, right now, if you were to annualize that, you should be at a 3,022,000. You're 2.8, so it's 158,000 behind. So is that because you're not selling as much water as you thought, or did you not go up on the rates to the extent you thought you would? Or?
We did 68 million gallons this past month. That's the most we've done since. And we've had to open up the valve in Toccoa, so we're almost paying twice the amount to Toccoa over Baldwin, because we were bumping our limits.
Limit with Baldwin?
Yeah, and so we're going to discuss rate structure this evening, because we're having to, the whole water department is having to supplement the additional usage coming from Toccoa. But we pay $249. Ledger, what's that rate to Toccoa?
I can't tell.
All right, but anyway, we'll talk about that in our meeting when Ledger comes up here.
Okay.
We didn't adopt the.
So next year, when you do the budget here in the next few months, you need to incorporate that in.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And just keep in mind, you said 18% increase. How much is that Toccoa? You know, how much is that water costing? And how much is the water costing down the Baldwin? Just be sure your 18% increase covers whatever your increase is with them.
Yes.
You know. Now water install fees, it actually goes a positive way. I don't know if you had more folks actually install lately, so that's higher than what you thought it would be.
Yeah, we sold 26 meters this month, but obviously that's not these numbers. And but also we're charging where somebody who wants the water lines extended, they have to pay for the material and the labor and pay us back ahead of time before we do that work.
Okay.
So there's some additional funding in there.
So that's in that water install fee.
I would guess it should be.
And that's why that's up. Okay.
But again, when we sell 26 water meters in the month of August, that's $78,000.
Yeah.
But that's not included in this.
Right.
So,
Okay. If you flip to page 5 of 9, bottom right is where the page number is, you'll see up at the top quarter, you'll see annualized there, 88,807. That's sewer fees. That one's a little behind, just like the water is, compared to what you budgeted. So 7-month annualized out is 480,000, and you're at 391. So that's a little behind as well. So the biggest thing I see in most of these accounts, we don't have to go over every one of these, but I wanted y'all to have these where we had kind of made some marks on it. I won't go over anything else, but the biggest thing is your salaries appear to be quite a bit higher than what was budgeted. So my advice there would be, when you budget this year, take a close look at that and be sure that we're budgeting the correct amount.
and I will add with that, there has been a lot of turnover in public safety with police and fire, with a lot of new hires, replacing officers and the firefighters with that. So there definitely is.
That affects that for sure.
And a new fire chief and a new police chief. So all that's had some effect on those salaries. But yes, duly noted that.
Yes, just make sure that next year we budget accordingly and, take into account what you've seen this year, I guess is what I'd say. Because right now, and keep in mind, a budget, like I said, it's nothing more than a planning tool. It can be changed. It can be amended. I mean, obviously, if, they would prefer for you to amend it as it comes up, but I don't know a city around that amends their budget every month, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to amend your salary accounts when you know you're gonna amend it all at the end after the auditor makes their adjustments. So we have our one big amendment. Now, the auditor would like to see y'all amend all these. Like when they come in, they would probably love to see all these accounts amended. What you could do for that is when December gets here and you think you've got final numbers and you're really close, you could amend that budget. But when you amend, you correct me, but I think it's gotta go in the paper, you gotta mention it for 2 weeks or whatever.
Same process.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why most towns don't do it, no more than they have to. But the salaries are a little behind, and then keep in mind the water fees and the sewer fees right now are behind. So that's kind of a double whammy because expenses are up, but revenue's down. If you go back to the packet that you got for the 7 months, off the sheet I gave you with the scribble on it, that's just the detail at the account level. The other one, if you go to page 3, where we had started this conversation, that is everything we just talked about at the general fund level in totals. But over at the sheet we just talked about is the detail at the account level. So if you look down at the very bottom, I just want to be sure you understand this, where it says net changes in fund balance, you'll see that $53,944. So right now through July, your $53,944 is a good in the general fund. But keep in mind the reason you are is if you look right above that, you see that $912,664? Where'd that money come from? Came from the water. So if you're not transferring from the water, the general would be, in the whole $800-something thousand.
Guys, in these numbers here, we'll tell you that the general fund income for the month of July was $92,000. And also we'll tell you that the total expenses for the general fund was $235,000. Well, there's a $142,000 difference there.
That's right. And sometimes you're gonna have that. Some months are gonna lose, some months are gonna make. Because just for instance, like the property taxes, you won't collect taxes for probably 6-7 months. And then you'll collect some in January and February, March, and you'll collect some in November, December, So you're gonna catch those on the front and the back end of the year. You're not gonna catch any in the middle.
Because if you turn back to page 1, go back 2 pages right here, where it's got the line cut it off in the middle, where it's got the month reserve. If you look up from there, it's got the average monthly expenses based on an annual budget total. General fund is $235, water and sewer is $623 for a total of $858.
Correct.
So that number will always be right there. That's a number to always look at to see, and then where the $93,000 comes from will be on page 4. You'll see under current in that first portion there where it says total revenues for the general fund, $92,997. And it shows you right there where the income came from.
So like for instance, last month, you had a lot of intergovernmental. Well, what that is that's grant money. Y'all had some grant money come in. So that intergovernmental is probably.
And that was reimbursing for some of the expenses like Casey had for computers and different things of that sort. That's where that's coming from. So if you take out that, it's only a $43,000 month of income of general fund.
That's right. But if you flip back to the water, you can see. I was going to see if let me see, page 5. If you look at page 5, that's basically the income statement for the water fund. And you'll see on it for the current month, you brought in $632,000 worth of revenue. And you only spent $390, so you had operating income of $242. So, I mean, y'all are a unique town. Your water is very profitable most of the time. I mean, when you keep in mind, we start fixing infrastructure and repairing things, sewer and water, it could get a little dicey. And so that's why we want as many reserves as we can get, and we want the general to carry as much weight as it can carry, because if things go south on your infrastructure, money can get tight, because right now you got 2 months. So I just wanted to point that out, but you're unique. Your general funds, the way it's set up, it's small as population as y'all have, and no more property taxes and things of that nature. I just don't see how you could ever be very profitable on the general fund side. And so you need to make it where you can make it, which is in the water. That's my advice. I think the best thing now may be just if y'all want to glance through it, if you got questions, because the main thing I want to discuss with you guys is on this report here. This is basically y'all's chart of accounts. This is each account you have at the detail level. That's where you can see what specific account is way off, up or down. And so if there's questions, ask Mark, ask Megan. They can ask us. But
And they're quick to respond.
we do our best. I got 2 employees that have committed a lot of time to City of Demorest. And you call me and you ask me something, I may not have a clue. But I guarantee you Kelsey or Scott can tell you pretty quick.
We don't always ask him to go straight to Kelsey.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I can always get you the answer.
Yes, you can.
One thing too, Megan, if you don't mind, there's a couple of items that were linked up in the software to come out of the old bank accounts. We need to call Tyler and get that switched, because Kelsey's having to go in each month when she reconciles. And I'll just tell Kelsey to call you if that's okay. And she can tell you what those accounts are, because there's things she's having to move every single month when she reconciles, because Tyler's still got it linked to the wrong account. That's a Tyler issue. We need to call Tyler and tell him that.
Anytime, she just needs to call us.
Okay.
I'll make it harder.
Should be trained.
All right, guys, y'all have any questions?
And feel free to call. I mean, I throw all these numbers to you, and I'm sure you just hearing a bunch of, it doesn't make hardly any sense, because it's going from one number to the next, and that's why we kind of scribbled on there. It kind of helps follow a little bit that we can go from one, to the next. But main thing that I want to bring out is just watch the salaries. Obviously, you can't help that, particularly if you want to be competitive and you got folks that's left. You got to get the next guy. I mean, there's a cost to that. So, but when you budget, try to be realistic. Budget's just way off.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Any
Yeah,
questions?
you too, bro.
Yeah.
All right.
Y'all take care.
Next is looking over our tactical analysis. Mr. Day, what do you have for us?
All right. See what you have in front of you there. Do you have a second page too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's start on the second page. So all this is,
Second page being
yeah, the public safety, that's right. So all this is a collection of a summary of ideas that came from you all as we talked with each of the members of the city council and the division heads here in the city, and we also spoke with the development authority chair. And if there are some items here missing, we definitely want to hear from you. So if we've missed something, let us know. Okay. And it's kind of in reverse chronological order. So I'll start with the public safety. The takeaway that we're getting. So what this is a list of grant packages that we'll be working on, so that when grants are announced, we're prepared to apply for them. when grants are announced, there's usually not enough time to actually prepare a good competitive application. So you have to anticipate that based on your needs. And so you don't want to get a grant and say, hey, what's that good for? You want to say, these are our needs. Now, are the grants that are coming down the pike, do they meet our needs? And so sometimes people prepare grants in that first way, where they see a grant and they say, we got 30 days to make an application. Well, then they have to kind of do mental gymnastics to make it fit, and maybe it's not exactly what the city needs. So we want to be driven by your priorities, and that's what this list is, okay? In the first section, and so there should be no surprises. There should be no surprises on this list, okay? We talked about fire PPE. We talked about duty gear. We talked about the refurbishing of the siren system. We talked about the cooperative effort with Piedmont on some warning sirens with them. And then also we've got the challenge of the hydrant replacements that we need to make. So that's kind of the priority for the public safety areas. Then going to the first page, I guess, we'll start at the bottom there.
Is there nothing on police with that?
Yes, sir. What do you have in mind?
No, I'm just saying, was there anything on police on this?
Not at this point.
As well, I think we talked about armor and shields and things like that. And so we're trying to figure out the cost estimate on stuff like that.
If you have
That's a good
something,
question.
send it to them or speak up now.
Well, I will say too that when we had our retreat, Casey brought up the shields and some items that were $3,000 or $4,000, and he has since found some that are less than $1,000 that meet his needs. So we're in a holding pattern with him on some of those items for the budget on that. That'll be quicker than a grant for some of those things at this point in time.
Well, yeah, and it may, that's more of an immediate need. But the nature of this list is that it's always being updated. It's always changed. So I've got to stay in communication with you all and the division heads to make sure that these needs are current, and we do a formal update annually. Okay? Good question. All right. The next is not a surprise from our last city council meeting. You all remember the streetscape estimate projects, and that's just basically kind of spit and polishing our downtown area, making our park, Demorest Springs Park, a little bit more accessible around the outside of it. That's the main thoroughfare, which is Old 441 here, and improving the pedestrian, the way for people to have safe passage and connectivity to the neighborhoods. Also, those streetscapes include things that we've done in other parts of the downtown, like street lights and crosswalks, right? And maybe looking at paver material or making it a little bit nicer, right? So that's what the streetscapes, we've been pursuing that a lot just because the timing has been really tight on that lately. And so that we've been pursuing those pretty heavy.
We did.
Got any cost estimates on that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The street, just as the ones, the street estimates that were
They were
shown
attached to the original
last week
information.
or last month are the street estimates that we've gotten from Dale Yeager's old, the folks in Athens. I forget their Williamson. They've given us some estimates in June, and those are still pretty
Did you
good.
not see those attached?
We can, yeah,
Really?
okay, I can get you some.
Yeah, I want to make sure this.
It's about a 60 to 90 day.
Oh, okay.
So no, that's a great question. That's the biggest thing is that the state or federal agencies tell you to hurry up and then they make you wait. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. But
But just for the record, they were attached, all 4 sections.
right, we'll definitely get you a copy. The Downtown Development Authority, their focus is on small business development and acquisition. That just came from them. The City Hall, and these are projects you all are very familiar with, the possible parking lot expansion here at City Hall, and also finding greater utility, finding groups or businesses to use this facility and take advantage of that. Then the next one is the park enhancements. And I called it Sulphur Springs Park. It used to be called Sulphur Springs Park. It's Demorest Springs Park. And please forgive me, that's the historical piece. But these are enhancements to those parks. So we've got the Sulphur Springs Park where we have the 4th of July deal, the ball field that's over. Am I got it?
Yeah,
Am I doing it right?
Yes.
Okay, doing it right up there. And then looking at the opportunity for more walking or what some of the city council members talked about, historic preservation and walking trails and things like that. So we've got to make sure that that's on the list too, as we're looking for that. One idea was that one of the city council, I think, came up with the idea of having maybe an interactive thing where the trail talks a little bit about the history of the city and that kind of a thing. And the next one is one that we kind of came with.
One thing
Yes.
I see kind of left out
Okay.
on that, I'd like to see it, and as far as like no other place to put grouping on this,
Yes, sir.
would be some kind of restoration of the city cemetery.
Okay. Okay, good. I always spell that wrong with the A instead of an E on the second part.
Not the
Cemetery.
Stephen King spelling.
But, oh, that pet cemetery is scary. Yeah, okay, so you'd like to see something with regard to historical preservation
Yeah.
and the cemetery?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And what's the name of the cemetery?
It's Demorest City Cemetery.
Demorest. Okay, good, thank you. As we go forward, there's a lot of grants that are connected to the level of planning that we do in the city. And so we did come up with 2 programs that we're going to ask you about as we go forward, and that is the Plan First designation, and then up above the Water First designation. These are programs where you get special treatment from the state government by becoming certified in these areas, and then you become more competitive for water and sewer grants and infrastructure grants. And so I think we're going to have some infrastructure demands over the next 10, 15 years of the city. And as we have been making, I know that the council has been working on the planning quite a bit. And obviously, what discussion we just had about our dependence on our water utility. We want to meet the highest standards and designations for the state to be first in line for those grants and loans. Okay, so we put in the Water First designation. That's y'all would not have come up with that, but that came from the priorities that you all expressed. Also, along that same line is water and sewer and curb and gutter projects, a potential for community development block grant. These projects are used to reduce slum and blight in our city. If there's a particular few locations that maybe could be considered slum and blight, community development block grants can be directed towards those. Then sewer projects, and we've working with Fletcher on this. These are some of the same priorities that you'll see coming from him. Really the need for a sanitary sewer evaluation, and then subsequent projects with the manhole replacement and the old sewer replacement to reduce infiltration and to replace some of our aging equipment. And so infrastructure is key, and whenever we can get grants or loans in those areas, then we can buy at today's rates because it's not getting any cheaper, right? Sewer 10 years from now is going to be a lot more than what it is today. That's just how it is. We've got the water projects also as a precursor to a lot of work that we need to do in the water department is the hydraulic water model. And then we can do the line replacement to reduce the water loss from 25 to 15%. That's another way to increase it by conserving or by reducing our loss. Then we're not paying for more water. We're using the water more effectively. Okay. And then that also talks about the Garrison well that y'all are quite familiar with. That there's going to be some kind of a plan, and the loans and grants may play a role in the final solution with Garrison well. So that's kind of the quick and dirty analysis. Each of these programs are tied to federal or state or both or pass-through programs and grant programs. And they all are on a annual or biannual basis. And some of these things will allow us to apply for things every year. Right now, a lot of grant programs allow us only to apply every other year. So if we get the Plan First or the Water First designation or the CDBG, we can apply every year for the grants. But we first got to get some.
If we come up with things we'd like to add to this, can we call you or email you?
And that's a constant thing. If you have a question or a concern or a desire or a want, let's get it on the list.
Okay.
And prefer email, sir?
Prefer email?
You can text me, call me, email me. Yeah, probably phone call. Phone call probably the fastest. So feel free to give me a call anytime or see when you see me around.
Are grants available for all of these items?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Now what we've done is these have been pulled out of the interviews that we had,
Right.
with the understanding that there are grants and loans that will comply to each of these. So yes, sir. The answer is yes.
You know? It's crazy. We really need to think about what we want to add something like that. So, telling y'all, email, text, call, you know. All right, thanks, man.
Okay.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Hold on, hang on for a second.
All right, next is
Thanks.
SCADA upgrade. Mark, you want to pick up this?
Yes. Brian, you want to come forward, please? Michael? Guys, y'all heard us talk about the SCADA, which is the lifeblood of the water for the city of Demorest. And this is where Brian can see everything going on in any of the water tanks, booster pumps, where he can see anything that's happening. And just at the touch of his phone, which is vital because it's a 24-hour maintenance for Brian. And this system has been in place for 23 years, and it's just barely hanging on in places. There's places where Michael can't even get the equipment for any replacements. That's when there is an issue, he has to try to rob them from another part that he kept at his shop or something. And unfortunately, this is not a cheap situation. We've got one plan that is just using cellular service, where they would be a separate phone line at each of one of these. And that total amount is cheapest at $133,000. Part of that comes into play with the different topo, because Brian's having to reach all the way from one end of the county to the other, part of it into Hall County, and part of it all the way up to Toccoa, to Little Falls, that whole northern section up there. So it is a big deal. The second bid that came in for round number it's $149,000. And this is a mixture of radio and cellular. And when we have the cellular, the monthly service comes from, the annual service fee comes from cellular. When we do the cellular, it's 17 different sites, and you have a annual payment to make off of doing it that way. But when you have it off the internet, there is not a monthly charge, an annual charge. Because it's a free radio frequency, yes. And so this one costs more with the combination of both, like I said. And so you would have an annual fee built in there with that. It's $575 per line.
The quote that's all cellular, we actually got it down, bulk discount to, I think it was $525 per line.
Okay, so 525 times 17 was an annual fee at $8,900.
This was first.
This is for the
Offset.
for the sale. So
How
yes,
many sites are cellular on that?
5.
so that one is 525 times 5 is $2,600 on the annual basis there.
Why is it so expensive at $525 per site?
That's paying for the cell bill for the year, and then also the gateways that we use, they actually provide a secure link between the master at his office and all the sites, as opposed to just being a cell modem with a static IP connected to.
So it's more than.
It's a lot harder to hack into. That's a big part of it.
How about if it was an internet site that would be involved in that, just like that?
Then if you, so like say you had fiber or something at each site, then that would be between you and whoever provided the fiber as far as the annual cost. Our equipment cost would come down. We've done a quote on that, but I don't have it with me. But it's considerably cheaper because you don't have the radio or the cell modem in it. I hate to say off the top of my head what the price was on that.
Like Starlink or something like that.
That you're gonna be way more per month because at what's 525 divided by 12? 44. So you're paying $44 a month per site.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said 525.
That's annual. We bill once a year instead of you having to deal with it.
The first
First year's included in that
Included
price.
in our fee.
Okay.
And there's 17. Okay. Yeah, everything with the fiber was way out, even the upfront cost. And there was like 5 locations that they don't even plan on having the fiber on that too. But the cost was a totally different animal. And then we had another bidder in this also, and his prices were about the same. And one thing that we had with Michael is Brian picks up the phone, and Michael's there when he has an issue. The other gentleman kind of indicated he didn't know how much longer he was going to be in the business. I think he used the example of he didn't know how much longer he had a runway for doing this. So that wasn't a very comforting situation. So with that, due to the relationship that we've had, the service, really it just comes down to which one that Brian would like to recommend.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, now, if we do cellular, you could do one at a time, correct?
Well, we can't do one at a time. We do pairs of them because
Okay.
if there's a booster pump station, you also have to do the tank that it fills
Okay,
because it
sure.
needs to be able to see that level.
Okay.
That is a benefit of if you did all cellular, you have to do the master, the main control setup at Brian's office,
Sure.
but then you could do groups of them at a time. With the radio portion will all have to be done at one time because well, they all talk together.
So the difference in the annual fees is $6,300 difference. And the difference between the two quotes is $15,945. So
You have a lot more labor when you get into the radio stuff.
Okay.
And the radios are more expensive than the cell modems.
Yeah, in the total cost.
Right.
There's no additional cost
right.
than what we're seeing.
No,
Annual different.
No,
costs.
you're just, the only annual fee you'll have is dealing with the cellular stuff. So on the one that's 148,000, you're just paying the annual fee on the 5 units that are, those are the ones that are in the northern part of the county that are kind of out of radio range. And right now, they're actually on phone lines.
I mean, just looking at it, in 3 years, it looks like the more expensive bill is cheaper.
Right.
Is there any other associated costs that start saving you on this thing?
No real other fees.
On radios, we'll have to update.
No, that's the benefit of the radios. Like what y'all have now has been in for about 20 years. The downside is everything in there is obsolete, so right now you have the 11 sites that are what we call the Demorest system. It's all on radio right now. You have a UHF license frequency. And then the other 5 were originally Habersham Water Authority that y'all inherited, I don't know how long ago, long time ago, which are the ones that are the northern part of the county that are on the phone lines that have controller. That's the scary part, because those have controllers in them that have dial-up modems in them, and those haven't been made in 15 years. So if one of those goes out, that site's just down. You're not gonna get it back.
Question, radios have antennas.
Right.
Are they more susceptible to lightning strikes? than
They
some?
can be.
Is there-
And you have two repeater sites, the hospital tank and the South Habersham tank, which actually have antennas on top of the water tower. Those can be more prone to lightning than the ones that are just on 20-foot poles. Like everything else is mostly just 20-foot metal mast, stuff. It does happen. We do have surge protection on it, and it's grounded, so we do what we can to protect it from tearing everything up.
Is there warranty or insurance to cover that kind of thing? So lightning,
Not really anything on lightning. Well, your insurance might cover it. I guess that depends on your policy. I know a lot of times when a customer takes a lightning strike, they will file it on their insurance.
we'll go with total cellular that eliminates frequencies.
Yeah, you won't have the antennas on top of towers. Some sites you might have an antenna up on a pole, but those are, you're probably just as likely as the panel getting struck by lightning.
Thank you, sir.
I try to save the money. I hate to pay that yearly fee for the cell phone. That's just my opinion, but I mean, you may get to the point where you have to. I mean, the radios have been fine ever since I've been here, and if they have the new radios, it's cheaper and they work just as well. That's my opinion, just from the money side.
You haven't seen issues with lightning strikes on radios?
I've been fortunate. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but we've had very good luck with it. And the phone line that's up there now is on a phone loop. And anytime anybody cuts a cable out anywhere, it kills the service. This last time, it was like 12 days of just running back and forth. It was nightmarish. So if we can get off that phone loop, that would be wonderful. Obviously, either one is a good, but for me, the money was the deciding factor to be the less expensive route. It's more upfront, but you don't have to pay a monthly. For the next 20 years, you're not paying for it.
All right, Mark, we go from having a conversation about accounts and where we're at, looking at the scale. What's the plan for this?
Well, the funding, I've got it in here to talk about, but my only choice at this time is to use ARPA funds.
Then we can use those funds for this application.
Correct.
What other questions do we have?
I discussed it with Scott. He gave me clarification. He said basically it's for water, sewer, it's for a real purchase, something that's large and etc. We can use scale up, we talk money, sewer issue.
Y'all know this stuff's coming from the scanner. It's here. I've seen it. Brian running around, I'm not sure. Brian, how many hours have you spending?
Well, it's 30-minute drive over there and 30-minute drive
To
back.
Tacoma.
Yeah.
So it's an hour right
4 or
there.
5 times a day on the weekends.
And the other part is, with Tacoma not being hooked up like that, he's having to turn it out, turn it back. It's all manual for that, and that's one of those other costs that we have from EMI. And also, his part of SCADA does not include the price, because it's not hooked up yet for Tacoma. Fletcher had given us a price to include the SCADA in the total bid of $39,000.
It'll be a whole new site after build instead of
And then it
replacing.
plug into this same system.
And the good thing about the SCADA system is we do have a main break. It alerts my phone within a few minutes of a low tank alarm, so we can start trying to solve the problem, find it for the schools, because we have 12 schools. Usually we have to reroute water when we have that to prevent them having to call school off. So it's a very important tool. I don't know how they ever made it without one myself.
It's hard to tell 1,550 students, you can't go back.
Oh, I know. Well, I mean, that's the first question is how long?
Thank you, guys. All right, now we have financial analysis. What you got? Oh, I'm sorry, Panther Creek.
Yeah.
That's that.
Panther Creek is a DOT project that we were told last year would be coming up until 26, 27. And then they let the project out in July. And so this is a budget, an item that is not budgeted. Basically, with this project, it's ductile iron pipes that Brian has to move. Pipes cost $72,000. We have to do a Panther Creek water line bore to run it under the creek. That's $21,000. Then there's, and we have a rock clause in there that could give another $20,000 to get through that creek. And that's the unknown there. And we'll have some additional turnip seed cost to rent the backhoe for 2 weeks, $7,200. And of course, with our guys doing the work, there will not be a labor charge in this. But those costs right there are projected at $130,000. And my source of payment out of this is out of water and sewer portion of the SPOS.
We have 30-day construction time, and that's already started, and they want us starting on that the 15th of this month.
And it has to be finished by October 25th. So,
Unfortunately, these are some of the things, since our lines are laying within the DOT right of ways.
and a lot of municipalities have what's called utilities relocation budgets built in every year for this type of stuff. But, we also have Amy's Creek coming up, which wasn't budgeted for now either.
And the two we just finished.
Correct. Well, we got
Roundabout.
the roundabout we knew about, and then over here on the bridge, D. Higgins started back working on that last manhole, right there at Demorest Lake. And we know he's gonna hit rock there, and so we'll be having a rock inspection of clause in there too. That'll be an additional cost, because if you saw when the gas line company was trying to go through there, it took them weeks.
They've been doing that already.
So I think they started back last Wednesday, so October 25th. September 15th was the start date.
That was the last until before meetings started.
Yeah, he couldn't finish because of those two overhead lines. And they finally got those down last week before he came in on Wednesday.
But on that ductile iron pipe and all, I have got to get it ordered ASAP to even get it here to start, because it's 12-inch ductile iron, and that's not real common for us.
So you've got my overview, you've got the equipment rental, you've got the bid for the, sewer, for the water line, floor, and you got consolidated pipe all the way to the back.
Trying to.
We'll talk about that in a bit.
All right, any questions? Out here has to be done. Figure out what to do next. Any questions?
Awesome, all agree.
All right, next is the financial analysis. What do we got?
Well, Fletcher has given us a lot of information. We've had a time to discuss this the other day. You can see on your first page there, that is our current rates. Very first page there. So that's what our rates are now. And Fletcher had written us a cover letter about the expenses of the additional water usage, and he did some analysis of the water sewer fund progress report and model preparation, and then he gave us some choices. Fletcher, you want to come on up too?
Sitting next to the bad kid here.
Yeah.
The one who's in trouble.
And if you go to page 3, which is the chart that says net cash flow summary. And I'll let Fletcher take it from this point. That's okay.
Sure. So hopefully you've had a chance to review the report and the model calibration of the City of Demorest Water Sewer Fund and where it currently stands, and just kind of furthering the conversation of the revenue expense report to date that we heard during the budget discussion. You did hear that the water and sewer revenue that is coming in is less than what was forecasted. On page 3 from the analysis that we show, you'll see that based on the current trend, as it currently stands, we're projecting $319,000 in a deficit for the revenue. And based off of the current R&E that we just saw, and you forecast those 7 months out to 12, that number is 271,000. Coupled with the increased expenses, which are also shown on that current R&E that you received today, those numbers carried out to the end of the year based on the 7 months to date is $302,000 on our model, and about halfway through the page on page 3 you'll see we're showing at $345,000. So with the performance adjustment that we showed on the model, you're looking at essentially $664,000 deficit based on the revenues and the increased expenses. And highlighted in the report, we have shown that the reason why this has happened is because of the increased demand that the city has experienced this year thus far. In July, as y'all are aware, the city had issues keeping up with demand, keeping their water tanks full. This is because of the smaller lines that the city of Demorest has in their distribution system, and difficulty in trying to supply enough water from one end of the county to the other to maintain these tanks. But the Garrison Road well off has exacerbated this issue and has required the city of Demorest to purchase more water from the city of Toccoa than was anticipated. And that rate is considerably more than what the city of Demorest is paying Baldwin. So that, coupled with the increased expense, with the increased demand, also with the water loss that has increased in the city of Demorest, this is where we are seeing these expenses to date. So we did provide the city with some solutions in order to overcome this deficit. You did hear talk about earlier about the water transfer that is done each year. That number has fluctuated from time. Currently, the city has $1.6 million transfer set for this year, along with other budgeted items. So if that transfer was to stay and all the additional expenses to date, as is currently budgeted, was to happen for the remainder of the year, then the city would be looking at a 20% increase on rates in order to just break even. However, that still shows a $200,000 deficit, which was actually in the budget to begin with. So that's alternative A that we show, which is on the bottom of page 3. Alternative A, part 2, which would provide the city with a net cash flow of $370,000, would be to increase rates by 20% and decrease expenses by $600,000. Thus, you could decrease the transfer by $600,000 or a combination of other expenses that you currently see in the budget. And then lastly, the alternative B is to not increase rates by 20%, but stay with the 6% that's currently forecasted and decrease the transfer or other expenses by $800,000, which would still provide the city with a net cash flow of $283,000 with an operating ratio of 1.04 and a debt service coverage ratio of 1.38. So the city could elect to do one of those three, or a combination of those three, or something in between. And again, these are just the true numbers, and these are three alternatives that we are presenting for the city to consider if they want to continue to keep the budget as it currently is.
A few pages back in there, I've got a summary of cutting $603,000. One being from the general administration, one from public works, and one from sewer.
Where are you at on that?
Just keep flipping. Well forward. A couple pages back in this. Depends on how you look at it.
It's the last page of that. What's your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, these were basically some capital improvements that we just would not fund this year. And whether we were going to fund them or not is a different story. I can't answer that question at this point in time unless some things really changed. But I do have these as a viable option to go along with Fletcher's choice of A, part 2, with the increase and with these cuts. Again, the bottom line is the transfers. Like I told y'all a little while ago, expenses for last month were $235 in the general. We only had $93,000. It's pretty cut and dry with what I have to do each month and Megan in managing the bank accounts and the cash flow. You know, we transferred $25,000 today. Also, we made a deposit of roughly $50,000 today, with tomorrow being another due date. So, you know, it's just like, we'll be about 200 in the water and sewer and roughly 55,000 in the general fund. So, that's where we're coming into this year's budget we're working on now. If I look at that, what are we gonna cut out of the general fund?
We've had a lot of unexpected things this year, but
Well, the inflation, I know we all hear it, we all feel it, we see the commercials and everything. But it is a real situation. When a mile of water lines, sewer lines would cost Brian $40,000, they cost $140,000. To repave a street, it's $180,000 for a mile. You're not gonna get very many miles of those kind of numbers. And, the Georgia Power things we keep reading about with Plant Vogel, those increases, I don't know where it ends, because, you know, I do have folks come in and express their opinion about the water prices and everything, but as I try to talk to them about what's your power bill, you know, what is this utility, what's that utility? It's tough, and I hear them, but every one of these costs have gone up. Our chemicals are roughly $85,000. The labor for any of these folks coming out and doing things, the cost of these cost estimates, everything is just nothing but inflation out there. And on this, with Brian's area, there's not a lot of ways to do a lot of cutting because it is what it is. You know, I've told the others, anything over $500, let's talk about it before we expense it, even if it is budgeted. I mean, for Brian, again, $72,000 for ductile iron. You know, that's a big deal. We don't use a lot of ductile iron. And it's one of those expenses there. Because without SPLOST or Panther Creek, I don't know what we would do for that $130,000. Or the Cicada, if it wasn't for the ARPA money.
Yeah.
So it is not an easy thing to sit here and say, we need a 20% increase. But I'm willing to offset $603,000 out of that. You gotta make that happen.
Are they required to, pay the radios by the end of the year?
The radio maintenance,
You know, like in police capital outlays, from my understanding, that was for the radios.
Oh.
Or a portion of the radios.
right, that is, I don't recall if that is something that's gotta be paid in 2024. I know we had that budgeted because that's the difference of what the fire grant was. So, yeah, I was just giving 3 examples of large dollars, but if we really want to count amendment to the budget, we find a way to only transfer 800,000, a million, somewhere a lower number in there. But I don't know if that's even possible because in past years they've done that. Once or twice they bumped up to the $1.5 million, $1.6 million, but that's where we're going with this budget and what was projected. So these are real numbers, real items, real life effects to people. And I get it. I hear you. So my recommendation is the Plan A, Part 2, with these budget amendments here.
Fletcher, I have some questions for you.
Yes, sir.
So the rates that you're going off of determine our rate increase on the, I guess, the retail side, right, the customer. Is it strictly off Baldwin? Or are you taking an average of Baldwin and Nicola, buying total what we are, in theory, could get, right?
That's correct.
Are you doing this, so you're doing an average on both of those?
Yeah, so we forecasted based on the current trend that the city has experienced this year,
Right.
and with the, excuse me, and with the need to open the Tacoma connection more and use more of that water, we calculated it based off of that additional water from Tacoma and then the increased water from Baldwin that the city of Demorest is using. So those rates are based off using both of that water. And then the actual cost that the city also experiences running the Maasroad well.
Gotcha.
I use the base rate, not an average, just use the base rate here. So our current water and sewer rate for residential is $43. The proposed is $52. Outside city water and sewer rate residential. Current would be 52, proposed would be 82. And that's just using residential, because then again, you got commercial, you got institutional, et cetera, through there. And this is base rate, not average. Also depends on, we got 398 outside sewer customers, and 39 commercial, 6 institutional, 231 residential, and 122 multi-family, the new apartments. So, that's where I see the numbers from a base rate side of it.
You're saying alternative A, part two?
Yeah, well, you got the increase in the budget cuts.
That's up for discussion, guys. What are your thoughts? I know so we want to come in this before we start talking about these things that are affecting daily lives, but I think we've all seen how much everything is costing us month after month.
I would like to know, not right now, but, I'd like to know some of the projects that we're putting off to make the $60,000 cut.
Mark, you got some of those? Some
Yeah,
of those
they're
are
in.
a lot of water projects, right?
I mean, it's,
It's all right. Let's go back to your financials and go back to the detail.
year-to-date.
Yes. On the income statement sheets here, that's got all that listed for each one. And I had highlighted these on my working sheet that I had, but let me just look back through. All right. If you go to page 2 of 9, capital outlays, in that first section with 155 is under general administration. You see that 155 right there?
What tab are we on?
You're looking at that.
Not that way. You can look at that, but there's a lot of other things written on there. In the back with the financials.
Okay.
All right, keep going from there to where it gets into the details.
Okay.
Page 2 of 9 is the first one.
Gotcha.
And you'll see that's general administration right there where it's $155,000. That's where I took that one. And
I think that was budgeted for like city hall. It's been,
the second one, the 122 is page 4 of 9. And it is under public works. And that was a remaining balance of $122,000 of park capital outlay. Yep. And the 320 is under sewer. Here it is, right here on page 6 of 9. Under water, I had listed it as sewer, but it's capital outlays, about 3/4 of the way down at 320.
all of that is just stuff to update.
For the wastewater treatment plant?
Yeah, but this section came out of, I had listed it as sewer, but it came out of water. So it was 320,000. Your upgrades to the plant, capital outlays was 310, and there's 265. I could have taken part of that out of that one too. You spent 45. So go either way.
The water couple outlets. What he's asking is what projects are.
Right. And part of that would have,
Garbage truck and SCADA.
the garbage truck was roughly 200, 225. So, and that need hasn't gone away. What we did on spending the 25,000 on the garbage truck is maintained it so far. And looks like we're going to have to add a third day to the trash days. Yeah. So that's for a little bit later discussion. So.
What other questions?
Thinking on the radio station. That's the new
Right. And what I'm showing you guys, it's not necessarily as I'm showing you where we can make those cuts. It's not, I don't think the biggest part is about that right now, as it is about, it's a plan where I've got these, we want to take some of the more other areas, we can do that too. But my plan is to recommend the increase with a $600,000 cut. We can move those 600,000 in any one of these directions.
Any further discussion? All right, let's move on to bids and GFA grant. Mark, what you got on this?
Basically, we had talked about, since we decided to go ahead and do the lead and copper in-house, with Brian's guys, with 3 crews of 2 each, have done roughly 1,200 inspections of inventory in 6 days worth of work. So they're moving quite briskly on the 3,700, but still, that's roughly a total of about 30 days. And we cannot use those funds of that $85,000 grant on repaying ourselves. So you can
refresh my memory. What were those bids coming in at?
Oh, they were the cheapest one was like $289
Okay.
to do this work, and up to $2.5 million, and it is just to do just the inventory. That's it. So then we looked at, could we buy some equipment and not just send back that whole $85,000? And you can use up to $50,000, and they will only allow that money to use at 50% of the equipment cost. So there's 2 things that Brian has in here. One is a radar ground penetration that they can tell where the water and sewer lines are. It costs $34,000. So roughly we could use $17,000 of that. Brian has for his 2025 budget the need to replace one of the existing Bobcats backhoes. To purchase a new one is $88,000. So half of that is $44,000. And he intends to trade in our existing one for that difference. So we can only use up to $50,000 in half of whatever the material purchase is. So we can do that. Where you can get half and half. You know, if you get the $17,000 and then part of it for the new Bobcat backhoe out of this grant.
Now, one of your guys told me that this piece of machinery you want to trade in has, is it close to 1,000 hours life?
No, it's close to 3,000.
3,000, okay. So what's the trade-in value do if that goes up? What happens to your trade-in value of that, if the miles keep going on?
This gets less.
Just less and less.
But he estimates somewhere around 45
Trade-in value.
trade-in value on this.
Alright.
But this is showing the full cost, but we've got the other trade-in.
They came to appraise it today.
They hadn't told you the number yet.
No, and he said the interest rate is 0 for a new tractor. And the interest for a used is like 9%, so it's probably not gonna be 45,000.
Okay. So,
Probably high 20s, 30s range. If I was guessing.
and again, it's the cost, or we just send back all the money, we don't get anything out of it. Again, where am I gonna pay for this from? ARPA? Because what I have identified here is $441,000. Gauge is $149. Water module is something that's gonna cost $73,000. Total connection is $39,000. What I talked about a little while ago. And the Jeep grant contribution, I just was making a rough number guess on there for you. That leaves $141,000 to be identified. We have to identify all this by an agreement by December of where this ARPA money is going. You've got till December of 26 to spend it.
This hasn't been voted on.
Well, I'm really giving you more information right now because it depends on if we're going to change our intent of the GFA grant. Because before, our intent was pay EMI out of that and then to pay the funding of the labor cost for some company that when we did the bids was going to pay for that. So now our thought process is, obviously we're doing it in-house, we cannot be reimbursed out of this GFA grant. The only thing we have two choices with the money, send it back, minus the $15,000, or attempt to use up to $50,000 on that.
And you're utilizing the remaining balance from the other funds that come in, so the ARPA money.
Well, that came back from, COVID money that y'all got you got 2 rounds of those. And so that money has been there. That money can be built, can be used on special projects. It was to be like a starter into water and sewer plants, large ticket items that you would have. It's not like just paying M&O maintenance and operations. It is to fund a project to some degree. So again, we'll have to vote on ARPA money so I can turn that in and identify these in December. But again, the key is changing our focus on the GFA grant to changing it to the, so.
Our grant was due October 1st, right? Unless, the grant was initially due October 1st, so would that make changes into January, or will it still be October 1st?
I think I'm not certain.
Anyway, so Thomas, if we're changing our intent of the GFA grant, from labor to equipment, is that a change that they need to vote on to do that? Yes.
Running short on time.
Okay.
Would it be possible, right, if you think the system is stable enough to wait till next year's budget comes time and use that money to buy a garbage truck, which would allow him to increase customer base and start income into the city? Is that possible?
I have 2 sites that's down now, it's been down 6 months.
Right.
And, I mean, they just keep getting worse and worse, so. I hate to put that off.
There's a bit of a public safety behind that skater too, in
Oh.
case one of the sites come down, you wouldn't know that it's down for fire.
Which is our foundation, it is spewing out somewhere, and we don't know where, because
I'm just scared with that phone loop system for sure. As much trouble as we had last time, I went crazy trying to find it. The phone company said, sure, something on your side, it's not ours. Then 12 days later, they said, yeah, it was our fault. So,
And I think we've been
I
talking
mean,
about
is
this,
this trouble?
replacing this for a number of years. Brian, what was I remember a quote much cheaper than this year's ago. I think about that now.
Oh, yeah, it's like 70.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just hate for the SCADA not to be sort of a top priority at this
Don't
point.
think it's feasible.
Now, the ones that are down, there's their cell phones, you're gonna replace that with cell phone,
Those are radio.
and also the ones that are down in radio.
Oh, wow.
Great thinking on outside the box. What else? Anybody else have any further questions?
There's two estimates.
Let's just,
Yeah, if they're good with it, I just need to send that part of it, then we are.
Mark, we're gonna discuss the next one, the next page in here.
Oh,
tab 5. EMO.
F5.
Yeah.
That's what we just went over with the equipment for the GFO.
Okay, this one talks about the water system, water lines, justice lines, improvements, all those things. Okay. Next discussion is discussion of a lease.
Yeah, this is Daughters of the American Revolution. They came to me from the county. They're at the library, needing a secure room for their things and so forth. And so just gave them one of the classrooms. It's a lease for 12 months. They may have to vacate that room at any point in time. It's not finished. It's just the classroom itself. If they come in, they will just be able to use it between our normal business hours, 8 to 5. So basically, it's really just a room, decent $1 a year. About that, I was just thinking about, we have some space, storage, whatever they do, they've offered it to the sons too, if they want to come in and stuff.
Very good. Thomas. Sorry, it's similar to the one you can use. Okay. Any discussion about this? We need the space, we need them, or.
Yes. Yes.
While we're talking about resolution, Hampshire County hazard mitigation plan.
It's in the front part. This is something the counties need to have updated with FEMA. So it's really just a housekeeping.
We have in the hot seat.
Thomas, you review this?
I think I got it from the county nurse, so you probably not seen it.
Thomas, we take some opinion on this. Next is the water meter ordinance. We have a second reading on that.
That's correct.
Very good. All right, any other further discussion here? Thomas, do we need to take this thing out? We got them. All right, let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene.
Yes. At the middle school, yeah.
Appreciate it, sir.
Going opposite directions.
into our regular session a little late here. First, I'd like to have a moment of silence for somebody missing this evening. Matthew Osborne, you all know, a lost friend, and family member of our community. We need to make sure that we remember his family, make sure that we reach out to him and our community to his family. And then we'll have a prayer and information. So let's have a moment of silence. Pray with me. Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather here this evening. We ask that you watch over Mr. Matthew Osborne's family and let them know that they are loved, let them know that we are a community to love on them, and let them express their needs and whatever their needs are, let those needs be met. We ask that you watch over our city, let our decisions be beneficial to our residents, let our decisions glorify your name. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Two items, which is the resolution for the county hazard mitigation plan, and the second is the second reading of the water ordinance. Let's put the second reading of the water ordinance as the new number 6, move that up to the top. And then the resolution, let's move that as the new 13, or I guess new 14 would be what was it coming after? After consideration of the lease.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor? Next, our favorite part, appearance and public comments. Anyone here to speak, please come up. All right, let's have our first public hearing. Thomas, you want to pick this up?
Yes, there's a zoning ordinance that we've been discussing for several months now. This is the first public hearing. This is, you'll not be voting to adopt this tonight. There's still work that needs to be done. The copy that you all got and that was up at the front had some highlights and comments in it. There are a few things that we need specific direction about from you as to what you want to do, because it'll make a difference in how we reformulate. And when I say we, that's the royal we, that's me. What you all want in terms of zoning classifications. More generally, as I understand it, the city doesn't have a constituted planning commission right now. The city does not have a constituted historical preservation commission right now. Other than the DDA and the city council, I'm not aware of any other official bodies, entities that the city has. Some of the things that a zoning ordinance like this really requires a recommending body to be in place, or to have that body can serve the dual function of being both a recommending body for zoning ordinances and legislative actions, but you also need a body that can hear administrative matters. So in other words, if Mr. Musselwhite makes an administrative decision that a landowner doesn't like, the landowner, there's an appeal process, and as it stands now, that appeal comes to you. And sometimes that can create issues if the legislative body, there's nothing illegal about it, but sometimes it can create issues with you all making those non-legislative decisions, and that's why typically you'll see an organization or an entity, and sometimes again it's the planning commission that functions in this way, a board of appeals or something similar. I'd sent out a second email to you all and said that the historic preservation ordinance that you all have is not included in this. You all saw me step to the side to talk to Mr. Austin, and he was the mayor. Jerry was a council member back in 2016 when the city adopted the historic preservation ordinance. From the minutes that I have been able to locate in the ordinance that I see, I'm not convinced that it's clear that the city adopted the historic preservation ordinance, and it's got processes, and a lot of those processes follow what is set out in state law. But the ordinance that state law requires in order to actually legally establish a historic preservation district that the certificate of appropriateness process applies to is very specific, and it has to the ordinance has to specify the properties that are included in the district, the owners. In other words, there's like an appendix to that ordinance that includes all that. I haven't found that. I've checked through the electronic documents that I was provided by the previous city attorney. There are some draft ordinances in there that indicates this was discussed a couple times from late 2015 into 2016. In late 16, this property was added to whatever area was included, as well as some other properties. But and the reason that it's important is this: the city has now had 2 property owners in that area that want to do something with their property. And as the ordinance reads, they've got to come and get a certificate of appropriateness it's supposed to be the Historic Preservation Commission. We don't have one. The way it works is if an HPC doesn't make a decision within 45 days, they get whatever permission they've been requesting. So you can't hold them up. However, if the city is not going to create a historic preservation commission to consider these things, then frankly, there's no point in having a historic preservation district. They're intended, the way the state law is established and set up and set forth, it's a necessary component of having that district. So I understand that the city has had issues with being able to get volunteers to serve on these other boards. But if the city is going to adopt something like what we've been talking about for several months, there'll need to be a concerted effort to put those boards in place. So that's just kind of an overarching point. The other thing that I can make the decision and provide it to you all next month. But as we discussed at the last public meeting we had several months ago, the ordinance that we are utilizing as kind of the starting point is Cornelius, and they've got several zoning classifications that when I look around Demorest, it's not necessary to have all of those. But there are some requirements for those zoning districts in the Cornelia ordinance that will need to be accommodated in some way in Demorest. In other words, for a specific example, Cornelia has 3 separate R1 classifications. They've got R1, R1A, and R1B. When I look around, I don't think Demorest necessarily needs those 3 classifications. But there'll need to be some accommodation made for that. There'll be a single R1, but there may be uses in that chart that you all want to allow, and there may be uses that you don't. You may want most of the parcels in Demorest are at least 1/4 of an acre. Some of them, especially over in that area, there's a couple that are smaller. Most of them are a little bit larger than that. So the ordinance is going to have to take into account the size parcels and lots that you all have, or you're gonna have to specify that there are gonna be non-conforming lots. And being a non-conforming lot can have impact if someone wants to use that property line. There are, the other thing that, I guess the other specific issue that need specific direction about is there's a handful of uses variously called in here, personal care homes, group homes, daycares, those types of things. And those need to be addressed in some form or fashion. And I'm not sure that the way this particular ordinance addresses those is going to be pertinent. So when you're reviewing this over the next month, or if you have specific direction tonight, it would be helpful. Those are specific uses that need to be addressed. And I say that based on experiences I have in other cities where those have become something of a point of controversy. One city I work with, they imposed a long moratorium on a particular use like that in order to address their ordinance. And it took about 18 months to get that worked out. So, but it arose because of a specific controversy. So that's the ordinance before you all. I know that there are folks here that are here tonight just to address this, and so this is a public hearing, and it would be the appropriate time for public comment unless mayor, council, city manager have specific questions.
I have something to say. This is we saw this a couple of days ago, so this is, we're laying our eyes on this community for the first time. So I challenge everyone to grab a copy of it, start making comments, write them down, drop them off by Mark, Megan, one of us, get them to us. Because without your input, this is the framework, we gotta go through this with a fine tooth comb. We gotta go through and make sure, because right now, with this framework, we gotta decide what our community is gonna look like. Whether it's gonna look like that we allow carnivals that are set up permanently, or we allow chickens in people's backyards. These things that we grown to love, seeing chickens run around Demorest in people's yards, stuff like that. We need to address those things we need to decide whether or not we allow somebody to build an apartment in their backyard and set that apartment 10 feet off the property line. Because right now, it's in here. You can do that. There's a lot of things that are in this framework you go through and modify. Make sure you grab it, challenge the council to dig into it deeply, start scratching on it, look at it back and front, because everywhere you can get it. Because now's the time. Let's knock it out. And let's work together as a community, whether you're watching it online or wherever, let's come get a packet, let's go through it, look at it, make sure we're defining our communities the way that we want to define.
Before this discussion starts, just one other point that I want to make. When we last met and talked, there was also discussion about a set of development regulations or development standards. The council, a previous council, had been given a set of development regulations that had been provided to us by EMI that was based on Baldwin's, and the council at that time, and I believe at least some of you have expressed that set of documents, that set of rules is not going to necessarily work here in Demorest. The other thing that when you create a set of development regs or minimum development standards like that, it can become quite cumbersome and expensive, both for the city and for the development community, if you don't have enough professional staff in-house. If you have to use third-party staff for all of the things that are required, all of the reviews that are required by those development standards or those development regulations, you've got to have a fee structure in place. And firms like Fletcher's and Clark Patterson and Swanee and there's a half dozen firms in this general area that do that kind of thing, and they'll give us a fee structure to do that. But it winds up adding a substantial amount of money because the city can't afford to pay for that thing, to pay for those things. It has to be passed through to the developers, and you can wind up with delays and that kind of thing. So that's another thing. I talked to Ralph Taylor this afternoon. If anybody has seen the agenda for the Habersham County Planning Commission tonight, there's an agenda item for a part of a set of development regs or development standards. There doesn't appear to be a draft of those yet. Ralph believes that tonight was really going to be more about discussion. I haven't talked to the planner at the county to find out if there's an actual draft. When it was discussed several months, almost 2 years ago now, the thought is that the Economic Development Committee for the county would work on a set of development standards that the county would adopt, and some or all the cities in the county could also adopt. And that has, for a variety of reasons, probably, that has not, those have not been fully formed yet. But before this council adopts a set of development regs, just based on another city that may have more staff than this city, that's also something to consider. State law requirements apply the city did adopt a set of stormwater erosion control and sediment control ordinances several months ago. So those are in place. But other more traditional development standards, such as roads and streets and those kind of things, other than what's in our current ordinance, you don't have currently. So
As far as building requirements, we still follow
the building codes, yes, of course.
Thomas, if I can add to that, part of what he's talking about, guys, is somebody comes in, they want to do water and sewer. Well, they look at our regs and they can see what Brian has told us, the way they want that plan put together. They can also have how wide the streets are, how wide the sidewalks are. So really, a developer comes in, his folks look at all this, they know what they have to do. That's where some of ours is lagging, comes into interpretation of what you think or what I think, where it should be laid out black and white. With that, so that when a developer comes, he's making some projections on what he can do with development part. He knows what our standards are, and those standards are highly, highly needed.
we put the packet online
Yes, we can.
on the website.
How about the font can be any bigger?
Well, when you print it, no. It's because of the comments. It is bigger, but whenever you print the comments, it makes it small.
Right. Is that some extra copies right there?
Yes, 3.
There's 3 copies if anybody wants one, or tomorrow or so, we'll have it online.
Please, if you have comments, please step forward.
What do we think? Do we think we need to have another, just a hearing just on this month, so folks can come and give an opinion? Or y'all would rather wait?
I think if you could compile a lot of those, keep us communicating, just to keep them running, then we can execute.
Yeah, I just think another meeting, if you're going, Thomas, are you going page by page through this, or you going generalization of this, or how are we looking to do this?
You mean tonight? I wouldn't go on page by page tonight.
I just didn't know, because I think, again, we all can talk about it, but until you look at it and you use a real live piece of property, Mr. Slappy called me, they want to know where we are on this. If you put Mr. Slappy's piece of property up there and says, this is what he could do under our current, this is what he can do under the new. That gives everybody a real life example to understand what it means. So.
Very good idea. But I do challenge everyone to look through this, go through it, fine tooth comb, make your changes, make your comments. Let's talk about it.
But this is for public hearing, so whatever, if there's anybody here that would like to speak, now would be the time.
You know, I want to ask a question. So, on the zoning map that's out there, one concern we have is the end of Long Street right there. And I guess my question is that the property goes up down Demorest Highway that's been zone high intensity currently? Is it due to a sewer line going down that these properties are able to get to, or is it due to this Demorest Highway that's a county road that the city, potentially like the city's road? Commercial growth. And I know right now the high intensity allows people to do multiple housing, apartments, et cetera, but, you know, my concern is if Demorest is what said that the property size is high intensity, I feel that the entrances need to be off Demorest area, not onto the little side roads. I know Mr. Schlecky's had that issue with Arlington. When that road is narrow, and I understand a lot of people have, you know, issues with using that road, et cetera, but again, they go back to what set that property aside as high intensity? What was it that, you know what I mean? Made that a high intensity piece of property.
I think early on, a lot of these zones were set forth by the mountain regional commission when they developed some of those maps. And a lot of those maps were prior to any of us. They're prior to you, they're prior to me. But these maps have been in place for years and years, and unfortunately, lots of times we don't hear any talk of them or comments about them until something
Pops up, yeah.
pops up, and like the two you mentioned, something popped up. So it's time for us to look these over and make sure this is what our community needs to look like.
And that's why we did take the map there and we did make some color changes, and that's still a way to do it.
Okay.
I mean, take some of those properties and, you know, and again, that's where the tough part comes, is if somebody owns that piece of property on Demorest area, you could be taking away their perceived use.
Well, I do understand that, but there's also, I know there's one lot that's on the corner of, Palmer Alley, and it's not high intensity. But everything right beside it is. I was looking at it, looking off the side of the road, heading this way, before the meeting. It's straight downhill off Demorest area. The only access you have is off the back roads back there, you know, off Main Street. So, again, I'm just kind of curious what made that area high intensity. Okay.
Even with changing the map and potential owner or current owner wanting to change it, there's still a process that you keep that in mind too. This isn't necessarily like locked down or a single use. They can still come forward and ask for changes.
Right.
I have a question. So is this document already revised, or is this basically Cornelia's? Because I know that's what we were looking at several months ago when we provided input. So is all of that input reflected in this version?
Some of those changes have been, made. There are other things that were just questions, have not necessarily been incorporated into that document. The one thing I noticed when I was reading back through it, the definition of livestock needs to be changed because for reasons that we discussed at the last meeting. And then for instance, there's definitions in there for a redevelopment area. I'm not sure that clearly that is the way that is set up in that ordinance is necessary. There's provisions in there for properties adjacent to railways. We don't have an operable railway here in the city of Demorest that would be impacted by that. So I mean, there's things like that are going to need to be changed.
So if it's designated as high intensity, does that mean that they can put as many apartments or whatever they want to on like 1 acre?
The approach of this ordinance is going to move away from the low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity designations to more traditional zoning designations where you have a couple of different residential classifications. R1 is kind of your general residential classification for a single family residential. There'll probably be a multifamily designation. There'll be a couple of commercial designations and a light industrial, and then obviously an institutional because of the the school, the hospital, and Piedmont University. So, I mean, frankly, I would envision there would be 6 or 7 different zoning classifications. And then there'll be, in the document that's been provided, there's a chart, a use chart in there, and it lists the types of uses that you would typically see in the various different zoning classifications. And in some ways, it operates a little bit like the one you have in your ordinance now, where some uses are permitted, some are special use, and some are prohibited. And that's where, on the margins, that's where the input from the community and the elected officials is important. And if there's a multifamily classification in Demorest, you're not going to have the same densities for multifamily that you might have in, certainly not in Gainesville, or even in a smaller town that's closer to the city of Atlanta. Multifamily in Demorest could be 4 or 6 units per acre. I think right now it allows, depending on the conditions, it allows up to 8 units per acre. So those are the types of things that when you move into this type of ordinance, the determinations need to be made, because like Mr. Musselwhite said, you pretty much want it to be mostly black and white with limited discretion, administrative discretion, so that when a property owner, especially someone from outside, comes in and invests in property, you can hand them a book and says, this lays out what you can do with your property.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna go back to agriculture. The definition has been discussed about making the adjustment there. Poultry. We got some across the street. You go to table 6.1 and it, which is multiple pages deep. And you look at that and it says number 5, agricultural production of field crops, fruits, nuts, and vegetables. How many gardens are grown? I mean, I don't know. Do y'all remember, Dottie, you remember Mr. Cason's garden downtown? Mr. Cason's garden in downtown? I mean, that was one of the things that was, I mean, I loved seeing that when I was a kid. You know, right there in the shadow of the post office, you've got corn growing, you got beans growing, you got all those types of things. So as we're constructing this, figure out what is permitted, what is not permitted. Right now, ag is only a special use, not a permitted use, and only in those zones that are zoned ag as it's currently written right now. So we got to figure out, does R1 get to have a garden and get to have a chicken in the backyard? Kind of thing, because I really think that our community can mix very well those types of activities. We're still rural in a very rapidly urbanizing world. And I think that's what makes part of our character strong here.
And I think we have a lot of notes and agreements from those previous meetings that we'll make sure are incorporated and put back in. So that's one. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, unless you offended, move on. Next is the water meter ordinance. This is the second reading. Thomas, do you have that?
So this is an amendment to your ordinances with regard to service lines on property. We've had a number of issues over the last year and a half. There was a time when the parcels have been subdivided over time. They've previously been under single ownership. And when they were under single ownership, the service lines were run to 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4 houses that were on there. But as the properties were subdivided and those properties sold off, the service lines were not addressed, they weren't moved, and so in some places, there are service lines that may serve house A that run across property belonging to person B, and there's no easements or anything like that, and it creates problems. So what this ordinance does is basically the purpose of this ordinance is to put the public on notice that that is a situation, that is a condition that may occur in the city of Demorest. And if you buy a piece of property in the city of Demorest, it is up to you to determine where your service line is, where it runs, and whether there needs to be some sort of accommodation made by a seller before you buy that property. And no longer is it the city's responsibility to move or pay for or do anything with regard to those service lines.
Do we have any comments on the second reading? Any public comments on the second reading? None, we'll entertain a motion to accept this water meter ordinance.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Second? Second. All those in favor? Next is approval of the minutes, listed on tab number 8. Assuming look those over, we'll entertain a motion to accept those as approved.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir. A second?
Second.
All those in favor to move forward? Next is the consideration of the tactical analysis. Guess we don't need to vote on this, right? Any other further discussion about tactical analysis? I would like all of y'all to go through it and make sure you have things to it. I'll always go through it, I'm sure I'll add a few things and see if I'll find them later. If you have anything to say about it. Next is the SCADA upgrades. We have 2 proposals in front of us and 3 options. Option 1, do nothing. Option 2, accept the one for $133,000. Option 3, accept the one that would be $148,000 or $149,000. Option 2 is the radio and cellular that will pay for itself in about 3 years.
All set, a little cheaper maintenance. Like Jimmy, you talked about option 2, have to worry about lightning strikes. That's up for discussion or motion as you see fit.
I'd like to make a motion that we move on, option number 2.
Very good. And option number 2 is the $149,000 system.
The upfront is more, but it pays for itself over time.
Thank you, sir. A second. Do we have a second? Sir. Thank you, sir. All those in favor to move forward with this system? Andrew?
So, we spoke about it during the meetings earlier, about the cylinder.
Yes, sir.
And one thing, it's one thing you mentioned that was kind of nice is that if we have cellular on all of the units, right? If there's any issue, he can just dial right in and troubleshoot from his office. Now, the radio, obviously he's not able to, but I don't know, it's kind of being peace of mind that might be nice.
Well, his service, his customer service to Brian in this system is impeccable, so that just gives him an added tool.
That does.
I don't have to drive here on such short notice when Brian has his issues.
Right.
So.
And that is a $6,300 a year difference. So it costs $6,300 a year difference for that piece of money.
Would anyone like to retract their vote to discuss that further? If no, we'll call that back for a vote. We have 3 yeses and 1 unvoted. Andrew, you have a vote.
Very
Sir? Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks for that, Ed.
Michael, thank you very much.
Next is, Panther Creek project. This is a DOT project, requirement project. Unfortunately, this project's gonna cost us $130,000 to remove that from the DOT. You heard what the cost is gonna be and how we're gonna pay for it. We need to entertain a motion to accept that move forward. We have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Just to check on.
Yes, sir.
This is gonna be coming from SPOS, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir. I'll second. All those in favor to move forward with this project? Next, we have consideration of financial analysis. Where we have tough decisions laid out in front of us. We have budget cuts.
We have water rate increases. We all know that the inflation is all of this in.
Very hard in the water department. Council will open this up for discussion. And a motion to file and, the way you see it. Whether that's with the water rate increase and with the, in the budget change. Does anyone have anything you'd like to discuss?
If we go up on water rates, we should come down on budget too. Gotta bring that through. Should be some shared responsibility in this.
Thank you.
I just had an issue with a 6% annual increase. Okay. That was included. I think that's something the council should vote on here, rather than this. What?
You said 6%?
Yeah, in this paperwork, it said something about 6% automatic increase year to year.
Yeah, that's another option that he gave us. I think it was.
Is that even more?
No, that was all, that was the.
Let's see. I'll make a motion that we, as much as we can, we're gonna have to divide this up between the city not getting things that we have budgeted for and also raising the cost of water, and that would be alternate A part 2.
Okay. And Jimmy, looking back, I see what you're talking about. That is alternate B, that's on that page 4, which is an option that you can vote on. Not a motion that's on the floor, that's not an option that's being proposed.
Okay.
We have a motion to move forward with option A part 2. Do we have a second?
And that is a $600,000 cut from our budget.
Correct. Second. Second. All those in favor to move forward with this? Thank you. All those in favor, no. Okay. Jimmy, Mr. Cook?
No.
No. All right, we'll open it back up on the floor for another option.
We can't kick it down.
Please, counsel, if you have another opinion, please set it forward.
Nobody wants to vote to raise anything, obviously. But obviously, the way that things are in our own homes, things cost more to provide. Things cost more to purchase. The pipe that we put in the ground that could a couple of years ago been $70,000, it's now $140,000. We're taking projects off the table, $600,000 worth of projects that would be going to our citizens. Good projects, projects that are needed, but we're having to take those off the table so that we can provide water and only jack it up 20%. This is sharing the burden. The city shares the burden. We're all paying more. If you vote no, I'd like to know how you're going to pay for these things.
And unfortunately, we've seen cost increases hit us everywhere. We were talking about Georgia Power. Georgia Power has had 3 increases in the past 18 months. And we see a lot of this in our own power bills, how we're being hit in every direction. When we talk about large, federal government going into shutdowns, they're going into shutdowns over budgets and things of that nature. Unfortunately, if we can't meet some of our needs, then that's where we would be leading and looking at our larger cuts. And what would the larger cuts even look like with where we're at? We only bring in a small portion of city taxes. What's our public safety budget is huge compared to what we bring in on taxes. And I'm glad that we can fund our city and community with those city services.
My issue with this is you're asking us to raise the water rates before we've looked at the budget for next year.
Well, this is to fund our budget for this year. This goes into next year. This is to finish this year. Like we heard from the accountant today, how we're trending, things like that. And this is to finish our budget for this year.
But those rates will carry on.
Yeah, rates will carry on. And if we see that we're carrying on, I'd love to be the first one to cut water rates, cut taxes.
My point is you can't continue kicking things down the road because they're uncomfortable.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I know things cost more, we've got to look at that, but I think we should also look at the budget and see if there's places we can cut it and maybe not have to raise it 20%.
So start looking at that. There's and that's what it does, right?
It's just as we continue with the same path, because again, we're transferring. So as Coach said, he said you gotta cut the transfers or something else. We gotta cut the transfers out, or we gotta cut something else.
And the transfers are from the water department to the
Correct.
general account.
Which funds the function of the city.
If you wanna cut real money, real cash, cut out the budget, cut out the transfers. But again, the city can't pay for the city general fund without the transfers. So tell me what to cut and amend in the existing budget, and we'll know how to change that in the budget we'll be presenting in the next 2 months, or next month for 2025. Because doing the capital outlays, we may not have funded those this year. So it's not real cash. You want real cash? Cut out the transfers.
I guess my point is, we're looking at this stuff, we're looking at walking trails, dog parks, parking improvements, and those are all good, fine things, but this city is in a financial crisis.
Well, those things are grants that we're looking at.
100%.
Hopefully they are. Yeah. We do have some SLOSS dollars that are allocated for some of those projects that we can use to match on some of those things that are allocated for those things that we can't use on day-to-day operations. This model opens up for day-to-day operations
things that we need to function, things like salaries, things like.
Salaries, water and sewer,
Yeah.
just like the accountant said.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's things that are eating us up. And when we look at the cost of our water increasing and how much more money we're spending on that, I don't know what could be done.
With that also, you have not seen me bring anything to you about the post office. You haven't seen me bring you anything about parking. You haven't seen me bring anything about dog park. You haven't seen me bring anything to you about walking trails. Those are just pushed back out of the way at the present time because we've got some things we've got to do. And that's what I'm trying to give y'all the tools to help us do what we're doing to run the city. Because again, I haven't brought any of those items to you in months. So I don't even see them as being a talking point from my point of view.
When we look at, we're in a great position where our taxes are low, which is phenomenal. We've collected $246,000 in taxes this year, which is not a lot of money to operate our city, which is fantastic. We can operate our city and benefit from our water. And we look at how far our water lines run out. Four waters before us pushes water lines out like the county to fund us, and how that benefits us. We look at just some of the, I hate to pick on the fire department or water department, but when we look at what the property taxes are, it's a drop in the bucket of what those are. And those are being funded by these water. Do you have any other idea specifically that you'd like to look at?
No. This is more of what we're doing. I know, I really want to set a 20%, maybe 15%, and raise budget cut. I think the water down the outreach. We have a little movement there in sewer.
Yeah, I think anything is a possibility. I think the problem is we're fighting the clock. And the clock is.
Mr. Mayor, respectfully.
Yes.
I had a motion and a second, and you're sitting at a 2-2 vote.
Yes.
You either gotta make another.
I'm aware of that. I just want to make sure that we're moving forward with this.
All I was saying was you gotta pull that motion back off the table to a motion to reconsider, or you got a 2-2 vote.
Yeah. Well, I will pull it back for a motion to reconsider and open it back up. Donnie, you want to remake your motion?
I will make my motion just as I made it the first time.
Okay, which is option A.
Option A, part 2.
Do we have a
Stop
second?
kicking the can down the road.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, move forward. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, 4. Next is looking at bids for the G-Club.
I probably can do this administratively since we voted to accept the grant. We would just administratively change to look at qualifying for the equipment purchase grants. And it's just a process first to see, Demorest will they approve of grass and farm. At this point in time, and then we can discuss and funding mechanisms.
Council, they are comfortable moving forward with that decision.
Well, there was a amount in here for $140,000 that has not been applied to anything, is that correct?
I was just showing those as an example.
Is that? Fire department has over $100,000 worth of immediate needs. Could those funds be applied to that?
I think this is only for water and sewer, correct? Well, I'll go back and look at that. I think the key is it was more tangible items, so we would have to see and physically submit the list of what you're thinking. And I'll have to ask to see if water hose, that's, turnout gear, some of those things.
Stuff like that.
Right, as opposed to a hard equipment or putting it toward computer systems, things of that sort. So that, I would just have to, but that wasn't for a load at this point in time on the arc, it was just a spur. Just we'll have to do some other things before we do it.
Before you find out, if we use other services and email.
Yes, I agree.
All right, next is consideration of the lease. Do we have a motion to move forward to allow the Daughters of the American Revolution to lease a city room from us? Thank you. Second? Andrew, I got yours first. All those in favor? There you go. This is the yes, sir. Thank you. Hazard mitigation. Thomas, did you have time to review that, or would you like to stay?
No, it looks fine.
Right, you want to explain that in more detail?
Yeah, what's before you is simply, FEMA requires the local government to adopt their own mitigation plans, and there's a federal regulation. There's a federal regulation that sets forth how that happens, and this resolution is simply you all agreeing to, be part of the countywide, hazard mitigation plan required by FEMA.
So our fire chief could put together our own plan. But I presented it this way just to make it easier to set point. But at any point in time, the chief can work on this and come back forward with this if he so chooses or y'all. Chief, your opinion?
I think you should adopt what you have, and if we decide someday in the future to change it, we can, but I think there's nothing wrong with going with the hazard mitigation plan in the county. Because in the end, if we had a disaster in the city, all emergency management functions are gonna be handled by the county at that point. And that's not saying they're gonna provide fire protection or police protection. They're gonna be the ones dealing with FEMA and Georgia Emergency Management.
Thank you. All those in favor to move forward and adopt? Wait, motion. Thank you. Second? All those in favor? Very good. All right, next, manager's report.
All right, with that, Casey wasn't in here, so Casey, if you'll come forward, I'll turn your microphone on over here, and if you'll test it to make sure it's working. Casey wants to give an explanation of the salaries and so forth that Alex brought up. There you go.
All right, can you hear me?
Make sure you're talking to him, please, sir.
So, we all knew when Chief Crockett left to run for sheriff, that was already planned. Several officers went with him. What wasn't planned, what wasn't budgeted is the PTO time that we had to pay out. So when the salaries look like they're way over budget, it's because the PTO time had to be paid out to each of those officers, and some of them were at the max and some of them were close to it. So there's a lot of, that makes the salary looks way over. And Mr. Burton, I talked to him outside, he wasn't aware of that either, which after I told him that made sense. I kind of wish I'd come up here and said that, but I don't want to interrupt your meeting start with, but I do want everybody to understand that the PTO time is why the salary budget looks so out of whack. It's not that we're just.
Can we get that with, probably with the two firemen too?
Yeah.
And we took like 3 or 4 payment schedules of salary schedules.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were out like 10 weeks. I mean, they were at full balances.
So
You'll see that.
that's a lot of coming out of the salary budget that was not budgeted for. So we knew that he was running for sheriff and he was leaving, but we didn't have it budgeted. So I want to make that explanation, clarify it.
The next time there's a discussion of your department,
I'll jump in.
Please, feel free. With that, I'm gonna let Brian come up, and we're gonna talk about a discussion that he and I had a couple weeks ago, that, Jamie and Brian asking for an additional half day for trash. And, obviously, our numbers necessarily haven't changed from that, but it's the amount of trash, it's the amount of Amazon cardboard boxes, for example, that aren't smashed or crushed, they're just set out there. And so you've got some additional trash that's different. And, so with that, talk about you, what's your thoughts on it?
You just did.
You're all now.
Yeah, Jamie was just saying that they're getting to the point of having to go to the dump more, and they're working basically through lunch now on Monday and Tuesday. It might take maybe 15 minutes, but they're wanting to add like 3 or 4 of the subdivisions to Wednesday morning, just so they can
like Sweetgrass, Legacy.
Yeah, the major stops, and he says the Amazon packages are just over the top. And yet, you know, everywhere you go, you see Amazon delivering it. So that's the main reason. And if we get a few more of these subdivisions, they're going to have to add another day anyway because of just too many stops and the amount the truck can hold.
So when would you like for this to go into effect?
Probably first week in October.
October, but we need to think about how we're going to reach these homeowners.
Can you just put a flyer table on top of each trash can?
We hope to something to that effect.
Yeah, just the 3 subdivisions for now.
And what's the third one?
Legacy Woods and Sweetgrass and probably Hancock.
Okay, so we'll get with Rhonda tomorrow. We can start scheduling that for invoice and figure out a way to let those folks know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Let's make sure that any flyer taken, the garbage cans, icy, we don't want to.
All right. As I said earlier, Brian's guys installed 23 water meters. So that's $78,000 for that. Emergency locates, Brian had 19. Total locates, he had 457. Work orders, 432. He fixed 20 leaks. He unaccounted for 730,000 gallons. Again, there's going to be a leak. We had a huge leak that happened last week when we didn't have Sam Landing that had a big effect on our water system. And as we continue that, also with the fire department's using the water there. As I like to say, is how much water we sold. We purchased 48 million gallons from Baldwin, 11 million from Toccoa, and 8 million from our Mize well. In our meeting, Brian got a text from Clarksville. They're running a little low on their water. Right now, they're pumping 400,000 gallons of the Toccoa water at a higher rate as we speak. And that's where the difference in pricing will be coming into play with that. So that's a big number. They just didn't need to call. They called Toccoa, tell them what they were going to do. That's not who they called. They need to call Demorest, who has a water meter in sales. And I think Brian has made that clear going forward. Otherwise, we would not have known. Y'all had asked Brian and I to firm up the exact number for the additional LMIG, which was $46,516,000. So we did get that lower down where he will be just doing the exact amount we got from GDOT on. He should be coming next week to start on that. And that's when they'll be replacing the speed hump on Double Bridge at that point in time. We do have the same issue with that rubber speed hump that's in front of the Commons on Georgia Street, where the spikes crews are coming up, so Brian is working on that. And, it indicates that Piedmont wants a much better speed table there. And, the people do fly in that section, and that little speed bump doesn't do a whole lot. So Brian's working on getting some additional quotes, and we hope to be doing some, cost sharing as opposed to just the normal speed bump. So more information to come on that. When I give the report from Fletcher, I normally say our wastewater treatment is operating within its permits. Tonight, I will tell you it's not operating within its permits. We have these large rains that we had last month, short amount of time, a lot of rain. We get infiltration getting through the manholes and into our system. So we were treating stormwater along with our wastewater, which put us over our limits for treating. Again, when you have the infiltration, which is one of the needs that Fletcher read to us, you want to have this happen when we have that. The water system is operating within its permit. The police department had 443 calls. Unfortunately, they had 16 domestic calls, 8 accidents. Officers made 108 traffic stops, issued 53 citations, which puts us at a 49% of citation, where that has been a little bit lower than that. Officers completed 14 incident reports. Officers made 5 arrests, and officers completed 30 hours of training. And the fire chief has given me a new form here. And his pie chart gives me 109 calls for the month of July. 62 of those were rescue and emergency. 11 were service calls. 7 were false alarms. 28 were good intent calls. And 1 hazardous condition. Now, we know that we've asked to have our out-of-county, out-of-city calls stopped by September 1st. It's probably not going to happen September 1st just due to timing of the 911 center in the underwriting of who goes with what. It's well underway. We'll have a report by September 15th to confirm. But we're already seeing a slowdown, are we not, Chief?
Yes, sir.
So there has been a reduction. It just hasn't been a total reduction yet. And with that, I will conclude, since we did the financials already, I will not discuss that anymore.
We're near our end of our meeting with another appearance in public comments. Anyone would like to speak on what you heard this evening? That being said, we do have something going to executive session for. Thomas, what are those items?
Personnel, real estate, and litigation.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll adjourn and go into executive session. I'll make the motion. Thank you, sir. Second. Thank you. Vote.
Jimmy, Uber ride's ready. Yo.
Actually, since certified letter process is underway, he's got, 30 days to respond. needs to respond. Court sitting, an opportunity for Salt Lake sitting right in here, and if he doesn't, then the judge will give you orders on it.
Alright.
Figure it out.